It had been 15 years since a president of the United States had made an official visit to Texas, but there were political fences to mend between conservative and liberal Democrats in the state. And the economic health of the city of Fort Worth hinged on whether General Dynamics would be awarded the contract for a new tactical fighter plane. So John Kennedy would make a whirlwind visit to Texas in late November 1963. He would visit Houston, San Antonio, Fort Worth, Dallas, Austin, and the LBJ Ranch in a period of just 4 days. But 3 gunshots in Dealey Plaza interrupted that trip, and history was rewritten. It's seldom that an event makes such an impact on us that we recall where we were when it happened. The assassination of President Kennedy was such an event. Channel 8 had an unusually large supply of videotape on hand in November of 1963. And when the news of the assassination broke, someone had the foresight to record the coverage of it and the subsequent events that stunned the world for the next 4 days. In the aftermath, many people charged the city of Dallas with the responsibility for what happened. To put such charges to rest, there are those who would have us forget the Kennedy assassination and cease observing its anniversary. But there is something compelling about watching these videotapes from our archives, for they contain history as it happened. There are things we can learn about ourselves by being able to step back in time and once again watch coverage of the Kennedy assassination. And so it is with a sense of history that we present the Kennedy tapes. And once again, you will see and hear the news of those 4 days as we step back in time 20 years. It's late Thursday night, November 21st, 1963. The inclement weather and late hour doesn't concern hundreds of people in Fort Worth who stay up late to greet President and Mrs. Kennedy upon their arrival at Carswell Air Force Base. And even more spectators line the streets as the presidential motorcade makes its way downtown, where the Kennedys will spend the night at the Hotel Texas. Early the next morning, the president arises and makes an unscheduled appearance outside the hotel to a group of well-wishers who wait in the rain hoping to catch a glimpse of it. Inside, several hundred people are gathered in the grand ballroom of the Hotel Texas to eat breakfast with the President of the United States and to catch a good look at his attractive young wife. The local television stations in Dallas and Fort Worth are providing pool coverage of the President's visit. What you are about to see is the broadcast of that morning breakfast.
This is Ed Herbert at Hotel Texas, where 2,000 guests are awaiting the arrival of the President. Just about 30 seconds ago, the President finished a 10-minute appearance at the parking lot across the street from the hotel, and he is on his way up. We expect him to walk through this door at any moment. The crowd has been here since early this morning, and when he addressed the group in the parking lot across the street, there were apparently 3,000 to 4,000 persons. This is just a guesstimate, as officials say. The crowd had continued to build and probably will continue to build throughout this half-hour event here at the Hotel Texas, because many people want to see the President when he leaves to go to Carswell Air Force Base. The 2,000 guests here in the ballroom have already had breakfast. They are waiting, and so in one sense, the presidential breakfast title is misleading, because the President will walk in just in time to sit down and make his address to the people. He should start talking within about 7 or 8 minutes, assuming he arrives within the next few minutes. And he plans to speak for 20 minutes. However, his schedule is so tight, he's due in Dallas in less than 2.5 hours. He may not speak that long. He may tailor his speech to fit the time available. At 5:30 this morning, people were already waiting outside, and at 5:30, there was a heavy rain coming down. It was strange to see that the parking lot, or several of the parking lots around the hotel, were already filled at 5:30 in the morning. It looked more like about 7:30 or 8 o'clock at night in downtown Fort Worth. Coming into the ballroom with the governor, the President, will be Governor John Connally, Senator Ralph Yarborough, and Vice President Lyndon Johnson. The rest of the head table's already been seated. They came in about 17 minutes ago. We understand that the President is just about ready to come in through. He'll come in through the kitchen, incidentally, as a security measure, and will leave the same way. There had been plans for him to leave from here in an open car. A convertible is parked outside, but with the rain falling the way it is, it's fairly certain that the top will be up. His route to Carswell is as follows for those who may want to get a chance to look at him when he leaves the hotel here. Up Main Street to Belknap, then out Belknap to Jacksboro, out Jacksboro to River Oaks Boulevard, then to Roaring Springs Road and on to Carswell Air Force Base. More than 1,000 students at River Oaks Elementary School will be out of class for a few minutes so they can see the president's motorcade go by. At Carswell, they will board Air Force One, that's the president's jet transport, fly to Dallas for a greeting there. And for our Dallas viewers, the motorcade downtown will go Lemon to Turtle Creek, then down Cedar Springs to Harwood, down Main, circle the courthouse, then out Stemmons Freeway to the Trade Mart. After the Dallas appearance, of course, he goes to Austin, where tonight there will be a $100 a plate fundraising dinner, the only event that's tagged as political in his tour of Texas. However, there is feeling that by some, especially his critics, that the entire trip through Texas, the two-day, five-speech tour, is political in that he's mending political fences here in Texas. Normally, a trip from the marquee downstairs up here takes about 30 seconds, but we assume he shakes hands with everyone in sight. And we've just had word that he is entering now. We have not seen him yet, but we'll stand by and let you know as soon as we do see him coming. Among those seated at the head table are Monsignor Vincent Wolf, who will give the invocation. You see him there talking to Fort Worth Mayor Pro Tem Willard Barr. That's Mrs. Barr between them. Down the table next to them are Judge Marvin B. Simpson Jr. and his wife, Mrs. Simpson. Then the woman there on the right is Mrs. Kennard. Her husband is downstairs with the president. He will enter the hall with him. The next lady is Mrs. John Connolly, of course. Her husband, too, will come in with the president, as will Mrs. Lyndon B. Johnson's husband. The next two seats are reserved for the president and Mrs. Kennedy. On the other side of the rostrum, you see Mayor Baird Friedman and his wife. And next to him will be Attorney General and Mrs. Carr. Then House Speaker Byron Tunnell. As you can see, who's who in Texas politics is here for this event today. Next to them are Mr. and Mrs. Marion L. Hicks. The next couple you will see are Mr. and Mrs. Jack W. Melcher. This breakfast is being sponsored by the Fort Worth Chamber of Commerce, and here is Milt Atkinson Jr., director of the Fort Worth Chamber. And seated next to the Atkinsons are Mr. and Mrs. O.C. Yancey. Mr. Yancey's a labor leader in Fort Worth. And the man who will give the benediction is Dr. Granville T. Walker, seated at the end of the table there. We've had several false starts, so to speak, that the president is coming. When he does, of course, there will be a large round of applause, and the Eastern Hills High School Band, 79 members, will break out with Hail to the Chief, so you'll have no doubt when he does arrive. When the president appeared out in the parking lot, he broke one of the cardinal rules of security. In fact, he broke it 2 or 3 times. He went out into the crowd, and of course, Secret Service men find this the most nervous time of any presidential appearance. As long as the Secret Service men can keep the crowd away from the president, they have a good chance of protecting him. But once he moves into a crowd, the Secret Service men are nearly immobilized in protecting him. Another rule is that anyone who approaches the president should have both hands visible and empty. And as you can tell in a crowd, there's no way to determine that. So whenever the president does move out into a crowd for handshaking and backslapping and exchanging pleasantries, he is always at the mercy of the crowd, and the Secret Service is at its least effective position. On September 6, 1901, those 2 rules were broken, and it ended in tragedy. That was the day that President William McKinley was appearing at the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo, New York, and at a public reception, the crowd moved in around him, and the 3 Secret Service men who were guarding him had no chance to screen the people approaching him. Because it was a hot day, Secret Service also allowed persons to have handkerchiefs in their hands to wipe their perspiring brows. It just so happened that one of the thousands of handkerchiefs in that large hall covered a revolver in the hand of 28-year-old Leon Czolgosz. He was an unemployed mill worker. He said he was an anarchist. He was also was a man with a long history of mental illness. And as in many important occasions of the world, no one seemed to sense that anything different was going to happen. When McKinley reached out to shake Czolgosz's hand, it looked like a familiar scene, the scene of the President of the United States shaking hands with Fred Nobody. The assassin shattered that picture quickly. He slapped McKinley's hand away and fired 2 shots point blank. In an instant, McKinley's attacker was driven to the floor. As the President was being helped to a chair, McKinley murmured, "Don't let them hurt him." 7 days later, McKinley was dead. Oddly enough, the assassination attempt was staged in the Temple of Music, quite an ironical note, and there was a quiet Bach sonata being played in the background when the 2 fatal shots rang out. Now here comes Vice President Johnson, Governor Conley, Senator Ralph Yarborough, Congressman Jim Wright, State Senator Don Kennard. But still, the President has not arrived. You may have heard the drums roll in the background in anticipation of it. When the President walks in, they will play Hail to the Chief. And now we expect any moment now the President to enter the hall. From our vantage point, we can see a flurry of activity by Secret Service men in the kitchen, so we assume that as soon as the head table is seated, that is Governor Conley, Vice President Lyndon Johnson, Senator Yarborough, and State Senator Don Kennard, and Congressman Jim Wright, the President will enter the ballroom. Secret Service man, who is one of the key operators here, has just stepped into the kitchen, so we assume he is preparing the way for the President. He was due to arrive in the ballroom at 9 o'clock, and if my watch is correct, it's now 9:10, so he's running about 10 minutes behind schedule. Just what effect this will have on the length of his speech, we do not know. As we said earlier, normally in such instances, the speech is tailored to fit the time available, and there's not much time available. Here comes the President. Quite a few ladies who appear to be quite disappointed that Mrs. Kennedy is not here. I am sure that if she does not appear, the President will explain the reason for her absence. He may have changed his suit coat when he entered the building from the parking lot attendant appearance across the street. He was quite damp from the rain. He was the only member of the official party that did not wear a raincoat. But as he walked by me here, I noticed that his coat was dry and there were no rain spots on it, so he may have gone to his suite to change suit coat.
So the President sits down to breakfast, but someone is conspicuously absent. there is just as much, if not more, interest in Mrs. Kennedy. The country has become enamored with the First Lady, her bouffant hairstyle, and her designer fashions. So the crowd begins to divide its attention between the missing seat beside the president and the kitchen door, wondering if and when the First Lady will appear. It is early Friday, November 22nd, 1963. The crowd assembled in the ballroom of Fort Worth's Hotel Texas is eating breakfast. At the head table is the 35th President of the United States, but there still is no sign of the First Lady. And as reporters and guests wonder where she is, the Texas Boys Choir begins an unscheduled number.
It's strange how in situations like this, a relatively minor character can become so important. Quite a few people in the ballroom are watching the maitre d'. He's the short man that's walking back and forth behind the head table. He put a plate in front of Vice President Johnson. He put one in front of Kennedy, and quite a few people noted that so far there is no plate at the place of Mrs. Kennedy. Now he's pouring coffee. As he moves down the line again, he did not stop at Mrs. Kennedy's place.
There was a noble ranger, his name was Mustang Gray. He left his home in Florida, you could ranging far away, went ranging far away. He never sleep within a tent, no comforts would he know, but like a brave old Texian, a-ranging he would go, a-ranging he would go. Oh, Mustang Gray was the hero of his day. No more the Indians will he fight, for he's heard his last maroon, having joined another troop, where they haven't any enemies to fight. When Texas was invaded, they captured Mustang Gray. He wore the yoke of bondage through the streets of Monterey, the streets of Monterey. Senorita, before the light of day, who opened wide the prison door and did him on his way, and did him on his way. Oh, Mustang Gray was the hero of his day. No more the torrent will he fry, for he's earned another man, and he's ranging in a land where they haven't any enemies to fight. And when this veteran's life was spent in Rose's last command, to bury him on Texas soil beside the Rio Grande, beside the Rio Grande. And there the lovely traveler.
We've just received word from one of the president's aides that Mrs. Kennedy is on her way down, and apparently this is what's caused the delay, because there are additional selections by the Texas Boys Choir not scheduled for the program. And as far as we can determine, she will enter the same way the president did, through the kitchen door that you see, for security reasons. 1 minute ago, we were told she'd be down in 30 seconds, so as you can see, we are just standing by until she arrives.
All right. Now is an event that I know all of you have been waiting for. They know what I mean.
As you can tell from the reaction, that's Mrs. Kennedy coming in. She's been standing up.
ladies and gentlemen, I proudly present the President of the United States.
I know now why everyone in Texas, Fort Worth, is so thin, having gotten up and down about 9 times. This is what you do every morning. Mr. Buck, Mr. Vice President, Governor Conley, Senator Yarborough, Jim Wright, members of the congressional delegation, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Attorney General, ladies and gentlemen. 2 years ago, I said that, introduced myself in Paris by saying that I was the man who had accompanied Mrs. Kennedy to Paris. I'm getting somewhat that same sensation as I travel around Texas. Nobody wonders what Lyndon and I wear, but I'm glad to be here in Jim Wright City. About 35 years ago, a congressman from California, just been elected, received a letter from an irate constituent which said, during your campaign, you promised to have the Sierra Madre Mountains reforested. You've been in office for 1 month and you haven't done so. Well, no one in Fort Worth has been that unreasonable, but in some ways he has had the Sierra Madre Mountains reforested. And here in Fort Worth, he's contributed to its growth. He speaks for Fort Worth. He speaks for the country. And I don't know any city that's better represented in the Congress of the United States than Fort Worth. And if there are any Democrats here this morning, I'm sure you won't hold that against them. 3 years ago, last September, I came here on the Vice President and spoke at Burke Burnett Park. And I called in that speech for a national security policy and a national security system which was second to none. A position which said not first but, if, when, and how, but first. That city responded to that call as it has through its history. And we have been putting that pledge into practice ever since. And I want to say a word about that pledge here in Fort Worth, which understands national defense and its importance to the security of the United States. During the days of the Indian War, this city was a fort. During the days of World War I, even before the United States got into the war, Royal Canadian Air Force pilots were training here. During the days of World War II, the great Liberator bombers, on which my brother flew with his co-pilot from this city, were produced here. First non-stop flight around the world took off and returned here in a plane built in factories here. The first truly intercontinental bomber, the B-36, was produced here. The B-58, which is the finest weapon system in the world today, which it demonstrated most recently in flying from Tokyo to London with an average speed of nearly 1,000 miles per hour, is a Fort Worth project. The Iroquois helicopter from Fort Worth is a mainstay in our fight against the guerrillas in South Vietnam. The transportation of crews between our missile sites is done in planes produced here in Fort Worth. So wherever the confrontation may occur, and in the last 3 years it's occurred at least 3 occasions, in Laos, in Berlin, and in Cuba, and it will again, wherever it occurs, the products of Fort Worth and the men of Fort Worth provide us with a sense of security. And in the not too distant future, and in the not-too-distant future, a new Fort Worth product. And I'm glad that there was a table separating Mr. Hicks and myself, a new Fort Worth product. The TFX, Tactical Fighter Experimental. Nobody knows what those words mean, but that's what they mean. Tactical Fighter Experimental will serve the forces of freedom and will be the #1 airplane in the world today. There's been a good deal of discussion of the long and hard-fought competition to win the TFX contract, but very little discussion about what this plane will do. It will be the first operational aircraft ever produced that can literally spread its wings through the air. It will thus give us a single plane capable of carrying out missions of speed as well as distance, able to fly very far in one form or very fast in another. It can take off from rugged, short airstrips, enormously increasing the Air Force's ability to participate in limited wars. The same basic plane will serve the Navy's carriers, saving the taxpayers at least $1 billion in cost if they built separate planes for the Navy and the Air Force. The government of Australia, by purchasing $125 million of TFX planes before they are even off the drawing board, has already testified to the merit of this plane, and at the same time, it's confident in the ability of Fort Worth to meet its schedule. In all these ways, the success of our national defense depends upon this city in the western United States, 10,000 miles from Vietnam, 5,000 or 6,000 miles from Berlin, thousands of miles from trouble spots in Latin America and Africa or the Middle East. And yet Fort Worth and what it does and what it produces participates in all these great historic events. Texas as a whole and Fort Worth bear particular responsibility for this national defense effort. For military procurement in this state totals nearly $1.25 billion, fifth highest among all the states of the Union. There are more military personnel on active duty in this state than any in the nation save one. And it's not Massachusetts. Any in the nation save one with a combined military-civilian defense payroll of well over $1 billion. I don't recite these for any partisan purpose. They're the result of American determination to be second to none. And as a result of the effort which this country has made in the last 3 years, we are second to none. In the past 3 years, we have increased the defense budget of the United States by over 20%, increased the program of acquisition for Polaris submarines from 24 to 41, increased our Minuteman missile purchase program by more than 75%, doubled the number of strategic bombers and missiles on alert, doubled the number of nuclear weapons available in the strategic alert forces, increased the tactical nuclear forces deployed in Western Europe by over 60%, added 5 combat-ready divisions to the armies of the United States, and 5 tactical fighter wings to the Air Force of the United States, increased our strategic airlift capability by 75%, and increased our special counterinsurgency forces, which are engaged now in South Vietnam, by 600%. I hope those who want a strong America and place it on some signs will also place those figures next to it. This is not an easy effort. This requires sacrifice by the people of the United States. But this is a very dangerous and uncertain world. As I said earlier, on 3 occasions in the last 3 years, the United States has had a direct confrontation No one can say when it will come again. No one expects that our life will be easy. Certainly not in this decade, and perhaps not in this century. But we should realize what a burden and responsibility the people of the United States have borne for so many years. Here, a country which lived in isolation, divided and protected by the Atlantic and the Pacific, uninterested in the struggles of the world around it. Here, in the short space of 18 years after the Second World War, we put ourselves by our own will and by necessity into defensive alliances with countries all around the globe. Without the United States, South Vietnam would collapse overnight. Without the United States, the SEATO alliance would collapse overnight. Without the United States, the CENTO alliance would collapse overnight. Without the United States, there would be no NATO, and gradually Europe would drift into neutralism and indifference. Without the effort of the United States and the Alliance for Progress, the communist advance onto the mainland of South America would long ago have taken place. So this country, which desires only to be free, which desires to be secure, which desires to live at peace for 18 years under 3 different administrations, has borne more than its share of the burden, has stood watch for more than its number of years. I don't think that we are fatigued or tired. We would like to live as we once lived, but history will not permit it. The communist balance of power is still strong. The balance of power is still on the side of freedom. We are still the keystone and the arch of freedom, and I think we will continue to do as we have done in our past, our duty, and the people of Texas will be in the lead. So I'm glad to come. I'm glad to come to this state which has played such a significant role in so many efforts in this century, and to say that here in Fort Worth, you people will be playing a major role in the maintenance of the security of the United States for the next 10 years. I'm confident, as I look to the future, that our chances for security, our chances for peace, are better than they've been in the past. And the reason is because we're stronger. And with that strength is a determination to not only maintain the peace, but also the vital interests of the United States. To that great cause, Texas and the United States are committed. Thank you.
Mr. President, your visit with us in Fort Worth today, the things you have said have refreshed and renewed our appreciation of your great leadership and courage. You have brought rain to moisten our pastures and our fields. You have brought sunshine in our hearts. We know that you don't wear a hat. We couldn't let you leave Fort Worth without providing you with some protection against the rain.
put it on in the White House on Monday. If you'll come up there, you'll have a chance to see it there.
That Texas hat is presented to you by Washer Brothers, one of the oldest men's stores in Texas. And to protect you against local enemies in the manner that you are protecting this nation against our foreign enemies, and to keep the rattlesnakes on Vice President Johnson's ranch from striking you, we want to present this pair of boots. We won't ask you to put them on. Here. The boots are presented by Mr. John Justin, former mayor of Fort Worth, manufacturer of the most walked-about boots in the world. And Mrs. Kennedy, as you ride to the hounds or walk to the rattlesnakes, we want you to have protection too. Before the benediction, I'd like to present Mrs. Granville Walker, the wife of Dr. Granville Walker, who will pronounce the benediction. Mrs. Granville Walker. After Dr. Walker gives the benediction, we'll ask that you please remain seated until the President and Mrs. Kennedy have made their exit. Dr. Granville Walker.
Let us be in the spirit of prayer. The Lord bless all nations with a desire for peace. The Lord bless our own beloved nation with rectitude and prosperity, and grant us to achieve justice for all within it. The Lord bless our President and all in places of responsibility with wisdom and with health equal to their tasks. And now the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord cause his face to shine upon you and give you peace both now and forever. Amen.
Wonderful. I certainly appreciate it.
This has been the presidential breakfast from the Hotel Texas in Fort Worth. Now the presidential party will leave Fort Worth, go to Dallas, where this afternoon he will address a crowd at the Trade Mart. This program has been an origination of the KTVT remote facilities.
Thank you so much.
I would like to say on behalf of the
As you can see, as the president and his wife are about to leave, they are stopping to shake hands with everyone along here. Two gentlemen there with the president are Secret Service men. The president's reaching out to touch hands with everyone, even with the police officer here at the door. Outside, the motorcade is ready to go. We had a report that the presidential party would go back to Suite 850 first, but it does not appear that way from what we can see outside the hotel here. You can see in the background that the several thousand people who arrived early to hear the president speak before this breakfast have not left. Many of them have been here since 5 and 6 o'clock this morning. Right now, the rain appears to have stopped. It rained very hard from about 5 to 6, then rained off and on between 6 and about 7:30, and a few showers were coming down when the president went out there at 8:50. But in the last half hour to 45 minutes, the rain has let up. For those viewing, if you happen to live along the route to Carswell Air Force Base, the presidential motorcade will go up Main Street to Belknap, then out Belknap to Jacksboro Highway, then on to River Oaks Boulevard to Roaring Springs Road, and finally to Carswell. There, the president will board Air Force Jet 1. That's the official designation of his jet transport. The 500-mile-an-hour jet will make a 30-mile trip to Dallas and land at Love Field. The arrival time for Love Field is about 11:35. They are getting away from here on time, so that deadline should be met. From Love Field, the presidential caravan will move down Lemon to Turtle Creek, to Cedar Springs, down Cedar Springs to Harwood, then to Maine, circle the courthouse, then pick up Stemmons Freeway to the Trade Mart. At 1 o'clock, we will bring you the president's address at the luncheon at the Trade Mart. That affair is sponsored by the Dallas Assembly, Graduate Research Center of the Southwest, and the Dallas Citizens Council. About 2 p.m., the president's party will leave the Trade Mart and go to Love Field to board the Air Force jet and take off for Bergstrom Air Force Base in Austin. Departure time at the airport, in case you're interested in being at the airport, is 2:35 from Love Field. The party will arrive at Bergstrom around 3:15 and drive to the Commodore Perry Hotel in Austin. There'll be a reception at 4:15 at the hotel, sponsored by the Democratic State Committee. Then at 6 o'clock, he will drive to the governor's mansion for a reception, which will last about 45 minutes. Then the party will leave for the hotel to get ready for the evening affair. At 8:15, the party will leave the hotel to go to the auditorium for the $100 a plate dinner. At around 9:30, if things go on schedule, the party will go back to Bergstrom and board a helicopter to fly to Vice President Lyndon Johnson's ranch near Johnson City. Then later they will go by helicopter from the ranch to Bergstrom, where he will once again board Air Force Jet number 1 and return to Washington. When this, as you can see here outside, the party is taking the president's presents, or the presents for the president, and the boots and the hat, and for Mrs. Kennedy, the boots. As you heard, Mr. Buck made the reference to riding to the hounds. Mrs. Kennedy is quite a devotee of horseback riding. In a few moments, the president will come out and enter his motorcade for the trip to Carswell Air Force Base. Once again, this program has been originated by the remote facilities of KTVT. At 1 o'clock, we will bring you the speech from Dallas at the Trade Mart.
As we continue our look at the broadcast coverage of President Kennedy's trip to Texas in late November 1963, the President has completed his remarks at a breakfast in the Grand Ballroom of the Hotel Texas in Fort Worth. The sun begins to break through the gloomy cloud cover as the President and First Lady leave the hotel. Thousands of people line Fort Worth streets to catch a glimpse of the presidential motorcade as it makes its way back to Carswell Air Force Base for a quick flight to Dallas. For some lucky ones waiting at Carswell, there are presidential handshakes and autographs. It is now about 11:30 Friday morning, November 22nd. At Dallas Love Field, Channel 8 News Director Bob Walker and a growing crowd of spectators await Air Force One.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Bob Walker speaking from Dallas Love Field. This is the control tower at Dallas Love Field, where a large crowd is gathered now to await the arrival of President and Mrs. John Fitzgerald Kennedy from Carswell Air Force Base in Fort Worth. This crowd started gathering out here quite early this morning. I was out here at about 7:45, and already a few diehards had gathered early to ensure a good vantage point. Police were circling the field all morning long from the early morning hours, and a huge contingent of police are on hand. It's hard to estimate the crowd at this moment because they are still coming in. But there are not many good vantage points left for people to catch a glimpse of the President and his wife, the Vice President and his wife, Governor and Mrs. Conley, and other state and local dignitaries. The Dallas welcoming contingent already moved out into the loading ramp earlier. Commercial jet is now landing, as you see, and the noise you hear in the background is that of a commercial jet going out to take off. Few signs in evidence among the crowd, and mostly friendly. The President arrived last night in the Dallas-Fort Worth area at Carswell Air Force Base. He was scheduled for arrival tentatively at 10:45. It got in a little later than that, but was met by a very large crowd at Carswell Air Force Base. A lot of people who braved the weather that was in evidence last night. May mention here it's cleared off beautifully at Love Field. Out here earlier this morning, the weather was a problem because it was raining off and on, scattered showers. The skies were dark, and at about 9:30, we started to notice some patches of blue. And sure enough, the patches of blue won, and now we have a lot of blue sky showing and a bright sunshine. And that sunshine feels mighty good, too, believe me, because it was quite cool out here, and it's still nippy with the breeze, but as the gendarme looks down over the crowd gathered, it's a warmed-up crowd compared to what it was a short while ago before the sun broke through. As we mentioned, the President was greeted warmly last night at Carswell Air Force Base, and they tripped in downtown to the Texas Hotel, where he and Mrs. Kennedy spent the night. And then, of course, the big crowd outside the hotel this morning in Fort Worth, where about 8,000 people were on hand to hear the President make a few remarks. Then the breakfast, which you saw earlier, overcrowded, overflowing, as usual. When the President appeared on the parking lot earlier today, that, by the way, the plane you're seeing now is a C-123, which transported in the big limousine, the famous bubble-top limousine, which the President and First Lady will ride in. However, that limousine now is down in front of the welcoming ramp, and yes, I can see it from here, and it does not have the top up, so our information from some of the Secret Service men earlier was correct, that depending on the weather, if it's nice weather, no rain, top would be down. So evidently, for all of you people who will see the parade downtown, you'll see a glimpse of the President and First Lady in the flesh rather than through the bubble-top glass on the outside. As I mentioned earlier, the President did step outside the Texas Hotel in a parking lot this morning where 8,000 people were gathered to hear him speak briefly. A few were disappointed that the First Lady was not there. The President told them that she was upstairs prettying up and said it took her longer to get pretty than it did him, and the crowd loved that. She was wearing this morning a suit of some sort of nubby material, pillbox hat and all. The President also said this morning in Fort Worth that it was the same, it's been the same in Texas as it was in Paris. That seems a lot of people are as much interested in seeing Jackie as him. In fact, he said today in Fort Worth, nobody seems to care what Lyndon and I are wearing. And of course, that drew a big laugh and a hand, but the people in Fort Worth did something about it because they presented a pair of boots and a hat, big Texas-style hat to the President and a pair of boots to Mrs. Kennedy. So they have at least going to have some Texas clothes to take home and wear around the White House. The planes are stacked up now. The planes that were going to take off have stopped, and there is a jet coming in on the south to north approach. They'll be landing from the south. Planes were landing from the north all morning, but we've had a switch in the wind. And so they're landing from the southerly direction. In other words, they're coming from over downtown Dallas out to Love Field. This could be the press plane. It could be a plane with the President. We don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. The crowd continues to pour out of the terminal, too. A lot of stewardesses and airline personnel are coming out to see the President. That's a TWA. Check it, Pan Am. Sorry. I'd like to remind you that later this afternoon on most of these stations, you'll be able to hear the President's speech from Dallas. And also later, that speech approximately at 1 o'clock, and also later on, his departure will be telecast live right here at Dallas Love Field, and that will be at approximately 2:15, 2:30, something like that. We don't know because we have to approximate those times depending on how fast the luncheon and the speech goes, the motorcade, and so on. But the President, of course, is going to go on that motorcade when he arrives here and takes off through downtown Dallas. He'll go down Lemon Avenue, Cedar Springs, Harwood to Main, and the big portion of it right down Main Street in Dallas from Harwood, which is right at the police department and City Hall area, all the way down Main Street past the Courts building, where he'll turn on Houston to Elm, go under the Triple Underpass, and then shoot on out Stemmons to the Mart, where he will speak at noon. According to protocol, if protocol is followed here, the Vice President's plane should land first so he can be on hand then to greet the President. But we don't know exactly what will happen. I may mention, too, that this is the first time since 1948 that a president has made an official visit to Dallas. President Kennedy was here in 1961, but he was not here on an official visit. He was here to see an old friend. the late Speaker of the House, Sam Rayburn, who was ill at the time in Dallas Baylor Medical Center. The president came for that, but that, of course, was not an official visit. That Pan Am jet that landed earlier may have been the press jet. It's another jet approaching now. A beautiful day now, just a beautiful day. That's a jet. That's an official jet. United States of America. The crowd already beginning to yell down below. And that should be, if protocol is followed, Vice President Johnson in that jet. And way off to the south, barely visible to the eye, is another jet coming in.
They're going to climb in a minute.
Some of the press debarking from that Pan Am jet that hit earlier. A lot of the White House press corps that, of course, follows the president everywhere he goes, at home and abroad. The president has been quite pleased, I may add, in this Texas reception thus far. It's no, and that there is a pretty good rift going right now between Governor Connolly and Senator Ralph Yarborough. Whether or not the president can heal that rift remains to be seen, but he is very pleased with the people, the turnout, etc., and has made no bones about saying as such. Next big jet approaches.
Yay, President!
And this one should contain the president and Mrs. Kennedy.
Here comes Jack.
Here comes the big jet in. The seal on the side. You'll see a crisscross in a moment. There goes number 2 right by. Beautiful sight. Beautiful sight. This is number 2. It's a 707 Astrojet. A lot of the Dallas official welcoming party is going out, walking out to meet the planes, headed, of course, by His Honor, the Mayor and Mrs. Earl Cabell. Mr. and Mrs. J. Eric Johnson. Mrs. Johnson will introduce the president at the speech later this afternoon. Several others in the party that we've noticed. Dr. Lloyd S. Berkner from the Graduate Research Center. Judge Barefoot Sanders, Judge Lou Sterrett. Unloading out of Air Force Two. Vice Presidential party. This is the passengers from the vice presidential plane being greeted by the Dallas official welcoming delegation headed by Mayor Cabell. And very slowly up the side comes Air Force One. Now Air Force number 1 taxiing in. A fire truck, fire marshals and all following the plane, which is normal precaution for where the president goes. Right into us now. Being moved up. Doors of the big bird swing open. Inside the door, the seal of the President of the United States. Mrs. Cabell approaching with some red roses. Military delegation coming off first. A lot of... There's Mrs. Kennedy, and the crowd yells, "And the President of the United States." And I can see his suntan all the way from here. Shaking hands now with the Dallas people, Governor and Mrs. Conley. Governor Conley on your left. Mr. Eric Johnson in the official welcoming party. Mr. Conley shaking hands with Dr. Berkner. The president now partially obscured behind his wife and a big bouquet of flowers. Working their way slowly, Judge Barefoot Sanders meeting the president, who gave him a pat on the shoulder. Judge Lou Sterrett now just visible. Governor Conley with his arm around the president. Kennedy backs up and waits for the president, who stopped to chat with some of the people greeting him here. Crowd waving, as you can see. People standing up all over everything available to get a glimpse of the president and his wife. Cheering and yelling going on down the way as they approach the cars. Beautiful break in the weather. Just a beautiful break in the weather. Clear blue sky and a warm sun. Nixon has gone home. For the benefit of that person with the sign, he left at 9:05 this morning. The vice president, former vice president, was in town yesterday. Crowd forming around the president and first lady. That's the official party, not the general public, who is not allowed out beyond the restraining fence here at Love Field. Now they're heading over to the car. Partially obscured from our sight at the moment. People breaking away now, running over to get behind other fences to catch a better glimpse of the caravan as it will leave here shortly and go to downtown Dallas. The president is up to the fence now, shaking hands with people. The president and his wife are right up on the fence. The press is standing up high, getting a lot of shots of this. He's done as he has done in several places. He's broken away from his planned plan and gone right up to the fence to shake hands with people. This is great for the people and makes the eggshells even thinner for the Secret Service, whose job it is to guard the man. But the audience loves this. Mrs. Kennedy's beautiful pillbox hat was the only thing that gave it away. I saw the hat, and I knew they were there. And, of course, the press going high and shooting right down below as the president and his wife kind of moving along the gate. People yelling at them, people running on the inside now trying to come down to this end of the gate, this end of the fenced-off area, hoping that the president and his wife will move along the fence. People out with cameras just holding him up and snapping away and hoping to get a picture out of their very own camera of the president and his wife. President still walking along that inside fence, shaking hands, talking with people who have come out to greet him. They didn't expect this. Now as he becomes more visible down to this end, the people cheer. And here they come, right down toward us. I can see Mrs. Kennedy. And they're going to come right on down and shake hands with everybody. Mrs. Kennedy gave a lovely smile and a wave at that time. Mrs. Kennedy right up. There's the president shaking hands with the people. He's waving at a lot of people, smiling, Secret Service men all around. Boy, this is something. They break right away and come right up to the fence. And the people who waited all morning in this fence are rewarded with a glimpse, and a lot of them with a close look and a handshake with the President of the United States and his wife. And he's coming right down toward us and toward our fine camera positions here. The press is having a field day. Somebody perched up on somebody's shoulders. President saying, "Thank you very much. If I may be permitted to read a presidential lip movement." This is a bonus for the people who have waited out here. Now, Mrs. Kennedy, right along behind him. The president still moving over towards some phone booths that were set up for the press. The people surging up toward that fence. But there is a fence, and the president waves goodbye, waits for his wife, and back they go to the car. Governor Conley standing in the car beaming. Governor Conley with a big 10-gallon hat on. Mrs. Kennedy stepping in the car first. Now the president. They both in the back seat now. Now the motorcade will very shortly start to move out. Sheriff Bill Decker, Dallas County Sheriff, driving his own car, personally escorting it with the chief of police, the presidential car, moving out. The president and first lady. Big, beautiful Lincoln, followed by a carload of press. Secret Service men, the car behind. Then comes the Vice President and Mrs. Johnson, Senator Yarborough. Now people over in this area are getting a chance to see the president. That motorcade will swing way around, go by the Continental Airlines maintenance hangar, head out for downtown Dallas, where thousands should already be on the street right now, waiting for a view of the president and his wife. Dallas police out here in force today, doing a beautiful job of handling the crowd, along with a contingent of Texas Rangers. And I still can't get over the fact that the president and his wife broke away from the planned trek to the automobile and went all along this fence out here, right up to the fence, shaking hands and talking with these hundreds of people gathered inside that fenced-off area. It was a great thrill to them and a complete surprise. So the party now is leaving Dallas Love Field. The three big White House press charter buses behind us getting ready to pull out. And, of course, as we say, thousands will be on hand for that motorcade now, which will be downtown Dallas, down Cedar Springs, to Harwood, and on Harwood it'll turn on Main, from which point it'll go all the way down to the courthouse area, which is the end of Main. It'll turn on Houston Street to Elm under the triple underpass, out to the Mart where the president talks at approximately 1 o'clock, which will also be carried live right here on most of these channels. And then we'll be back here again, of course, as we told you, at about 2:15 for the president's departure. I must say that the crowd out here has grown considerably in the last 15 or 20 minutes, when we were more concerned with going onto the air than we were watching crowds. That I would estimate 1,500 to 2,000 people out here. Not as many as at Carswell last night, to be sure, when they had 6,000 to 8,000 over there from all estimates we can gather. But still a goodly number for this Love Field arrival, considering the fact that the president and his wife are going to be visible for many, many miles and many minutes from all the way at Love Field, 7 miles from downtown Dallas, and then through the downtown area, back out the expressway, out to the Mart where the president will deliver his noontime speech, and then back out here. So I would consider this a big crowd, considering the fact the president and his wife and party are going to be visible all through Dallas. President in very obvious good spirits, and very pleased with his Texas reception thus far, as has been reported from Austin, rather from San Antonio, Houston, and Fort Worth last night and this morning, and just beaming all the time. Mrs. Kennedy the same, as they were walking along the fence and shaking hands with the people, and the people getting a bigger kick out of it perhaps than the president and his wife, although that would be hard to imagine because they were thoroughly enjoying all of it. The schedule the president is on is about on time, too. These planes started pouring in here about as time they were scheduled. The big Pan Am jet, first of all, full of the press, traveling with the president. Then Air Force Two, carrying the vice president and his party. And Air Force One, carrying the president and his party. And these three big jets will be here on the ground at Love Field until about 2:15 this afternoon, at which time the president will take off and go to Austin. He isn't through either. His Texas tour is by no means over, because he has a busy day scheduled for Austin. They're due to land down there at Bergstrom Air Force Base at about 3:15 this afternoon. There'll be a motorcade there, 7 miles from Bergstrom down to downtown Austin. They're going to drive 9 blocks down Congress Avenue, stop at the Commodore Perry Hotel in Austin, which will be headquarters for their visit there. At 4:15 this afternoon, a reception at the hotel for members of the State Democratic Executive Committee. The President will make a brief appearance there. At 6:15 this evening, the President, with Mrs. Kennedy, will attend another reception at the Governor's Mansion, attended by members of the state legislature and some statewide elected officials. The President's final official appearance will be tonight at 7:30 in Austin at that $100 a plate Texas welcome dinner in honor of the President and Vice President. Eugene Locke of Dallas, who is State Democratic Party Chairman, will be the master of ceremonies, with Mrs. Kennedy, Mrs. Johnson, Governor, and Mrs. Connolly among those at the head table. This will be held at the Austin Municipal Auditorium. The President will then go to the LBJ Ranch, where he and Mrs. Kennedy will spend the night. Then they will leave sometime about, I think midday tomorrow is the latest word we have, at what time they will leave and fly back. The President's weekend, however, will not be over, because word from Washington indicates that the President will meet with Henry Cabot Lodge, who has just returned from South Vietnam, a special presidential mission and advisor out there. And there will be some very lengthy discussions this weekend at the President's Maryland retreat concerning the recognition of the new government in South Vietnam. The possibility and the timing of that recognition will be discussed. So that's the life of a president, however, and so all is not just pleasure this weekend, because, as we said, the President gets back to business tomorrow evening when he gets back to Washington. However, there's lots more to come on most of these channels, as we've told you. Most of you saw the breakfast address at the Hotel Texas in Fort Worth this morning, and most of you will see the address this afternoon at 1 o'clock approximately over most of these stations. And, of course, we'd like to remind you, too, that the President's takeoff from here at Love Field will be telecast live over most of these stations beginning at approximately 2:15, 2:30, something along there. Well, the crowd can sure clear out in a hurry, can it? As you see right now. And most of them, or a lot of them, I should say, happier than they had anticipated, because the President and his wife broke away, came up to the fenced-off area, went all along the area, and shook hands and talked to hundreds of people who were gathered there. A complete surprise, and very, very happy people they were indeed. Well, there's not much more to say from Love Field. The caravan now approaching downtown Dallas. We invite you to stay tuned for more coverage of the President's visit to Dallas and Fort Worth.
The presidential motorcade has left Love Field on its way to downtown Dallas and what will be a date with destiny. It's now about 12:45, and Channel 8 is in local programming. The Julie Bennell Show, a women's-oriented cooking and fashion show. What you are about to see is a portion of that program when Channel 8 program director Jay Watson interrupts with a sense of urgency. Watson has just returned from Dealey Plaza, where he has seen the presidential motorcade and has heard gunshots.
Stretch pants, again in the faded soldier blue, which I think is such a stunning combination, and the black boot. I noticed that there are a number of hidden zippers in these jackets. Now, what are these for, Betsy? They can't be for, is it for mad money?
Well, it depends on where they're placed. They can be wherever you want them. You know, for the pockets, so that no snow gets into it. The zipper holding the hood in, because it's easier to put the hood on and off with the zipper than it is with the snaps. Then there's zippers up the side so that the jacket will fit tightly around the hips, keeping that straight, sleek look that it should have. And very often you'll find a zipper hidden in the arm.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. You'll excuse the fact that I'm out of breath, but about 10 or 15 minutes ago, a tragic thing, from all indications at this point, has happened in the city of Dallas. Let me quote to you this. And you'll excuse me if I am out of breath. A bulletin. This is from the United Press from Dallas. President Kennedy and Governor John Connolly have been cut down by assassins' bullets in downtown Dallas. They were riding in an open automobile when the shots were fired. The president, his limp body carried in the arms of his wife, Jacqueline, has rushed to Parkland Hospital. And if you'll excuse me if I give some directions and we talk about what we're going to do here for the next few minutes, but Bobby, let's tape this, if you please, particularly the interview with the eyewitness people. It is being taped good. Here's a piece of copy that was rushed to me and was torn off from the United Press in Dallas. President Kennedy has been shot in Dallas, Texas. He was shot as a motorcade left downtown Dallas. Mrs. Kennedy jumped up and grabbed the president. She cried, "Oh no," as the motorcade sped on. An Associated Press photographer, James Algens, 8LTGENS, reports he saw blood on the president's head. The AP man said he heard 2 shots but thought someone was shooting fireworks until he saw the blood on the president. He also said he saw no one with a gun. We were awfully close. Jerry Haynes, as you know, and Mr. Peppermint, we were awfully close to being an eyewitness. We were standing on Houston Street between Main and the next street over. Jerry, come in, would you please? And the next street over, we watched the president come by and gave him the applaud that is due the office of the President of the United States. And as he turned left, 2 or 3 shots rang out. We thought they were firecrackers until, I thought they did, until the last shot rang out and we heard people screaming. And we rushed over in time to see a policeman standing behind one of the fire poles, looking around as if for some place to shoot, someone to shoot at. I'd like to remind you here that as the news comes into the newsroom, we will be on the air. We'll have our eyewitness people here in just a moment. Vicki, would you see if they need some coffee or something? These people are awfully shaken up. They come awfully close. They were in the line of fire. Jer?
I remember, Jay, you said, I thought it was, you know, a firecracker or something like that, and then they followed 1 shot, and then a second or 2 later, another shot, and then another second or 2, and then the third shot, and you said the man's been shot at, and we both turned.
No, I said, my God, that's gunshot.
That's right.
Oh.
And then we turned right over, we were behind Mr. Dealey's statue,
right.
And we ran over to the cement wall, and we saw people beginning to scatter in places, and I believe our eyewitness was on the ground.
Chair, would you do me a favor? Would you go check in the newsroom now, and as the men come in from the field, or if they have stories, please let me know, and also get someone to check with, we were supposed to take the feed from KRLD. They may still be doing a feed from there. Check it, let me know. And until our news crew gets back in, we will sort of use this studio as our headquarters. These people, and you will excuse me, I don't want to interrupt you. I'm so sorry because I know that you are so upset, but I would like to talk to you for a minute. It's a little bit awkward, so the camera shots will have to fall as they may. I'm going to stand right here, and maybe somebody can give me a chair while we're doing this. May I have your name, please, sir?
Bill Newman.
And this is Mrs. Newman?
Yes, sir.
And this is?
James Clayton.
James, and this is?
Billy.
Billy, tell me what you saw and what you felt. What happened to you?
We just come from left field after seeing the President and the First Lady, and we were just in front of the triple underpass on Elm Street, and we were at the edge of the curve, getting ready to wave at the President. So
you were down under the viaduct, so to speak, weren't you?
Well, we were halfway in between
on the grass,
triple underpass. We were at the curb when the incident happened. But the President's car was some 50 feet still yet.
In front of you?
In front of us, coming towards us, and we heard the first shot, and the President, I don't know who was hit first, but the President jumped up in his seat, and I thought it scared him. I thought it was a firecracker because he looked, you know, fear. And then as the car got directly in front of us, well, a gunshot apparently from behind us hit the President in the side of the temple.
Do you think the first gunshot came from behind you, too?
I think it came from the same location. Apparently back up on the mall. I don't know what you call it.
For the benefit of nomenclature, all of you folks have gone out under the viaduct, and as you turn, going under the viaduct on the left-hand side, there's some grass. Do you think the shot came from up on top of the viaduct toward the President? Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Not on the viaduct itself, but up on top of the hill, a little mound of ground there, the garden.
How far away would you say that is from where the President was? A couple of 300 yards, something like that?
Well, I have no idea because I didn't see where the gunshot come from. We were looking directly at the President when he was hit, and he was more or less directly in front of us, and we didn't realize what happened until we seen the side of his head whenever the bullet hit him in the head.
Did you see the blood coming from the President's head?
Yes, sir. We seen that. I seen. I don't know if my wife did. I seen that. Sir.
Oh, yes, sir. It was awful.
It is awful.
That's all. It's.
What kind of work do you do, sir?
I'm a construction worker, electrician.
Is this the first time that you have seen a President of the United States? Did you see him when he was here before in 1961?
No, sir. No, sir.
You're a housewife.
Yes, sir.
Took the day off to come downtown and see the president.
Yes, sir, we did. We wanted our children to see it.
Were you in the line of fire? I noticed, I remember vividly whenever I walked over and looked over the banister there and saw across the street that you were down on the ground so that to keep out of the line of fire. What was the first thought that struck your mind?
Oh, I thought it was a firecracker, and I saw the blood, and I had the baby, and I just ran, and I got on top of him and laid on the grass. It just scared me. It was terrible.
Did you see anyone else hit besides the...
Governor Conley was kind of turned to the side, and he grabbed his stomach.
Okay. Thank you. Jerry, if anything else comes in, we heard a report, and I'd like to say here, for the benefit of you folks who are tuning in, who have tuned in late to watch Julie Bonnell's show, that we interrupt the program, and our program will be interrupted all day because it is apparent now that President Kennedy has been shot. We have no word in our newsroom, but we are standing by in our newsroom, and would you work as a runner with the newsroom, and as anything comes in, and if you get into the boys that come in that have been gathering the news, please bring them in so that we can have them on the air. Here is another word. We know, as we carried here, and all the stations carried this morning, the president spoke this morning in Fort Worth. He flew to Dallas, and that coverage was on. He landed here about 1:30, between 1:35 and 1:40. Vicki, did you get the coffee for the people? Bring it on in. He was to deliver a speech at 1 o'clock this afternoon, and he was on a motorcade and only about, I guess, 2 or 3 miles from where he was to make the speech in the Trade Mart whenever this terrible, disastrous thing happened, and it happened in our city. Secret Service agents that were in the car immediately began following the president. They pulled automatic rifles. I was an eyewitness to one of the policemen standing there behind a light pole, and you'll excuse me if I'm frustrated, you would be too, standing there with a pistol in his hand. The bubble of the president's car was down when the shots rang out. In fact, if I remember correctly, when they took off from the airport, there was no bubble on the car. The president slumped over in the back seat, face down. Conley lay on the floor of the rear seat. Wounds in the governor's chest were clearly visible. This is from the United Press. The wounds indicated that an automatic weapon was used. 3 loud bursts of gunfire were heard before the president and the governor fell. Just a few minutes before, Jerry Haynes and I, the president smiling and his lovely wife smiling. Do you have any idea which direction? I'm sorry, I forgot your name. I forgot my name at this stage. Mr. Newman, do you have any idea which direction? Would you like to go ahead? Go right ahead. I'm so sorry that you're so upset, and I hope we're not prevailing upon your good nature to have you here, except with the news like this. Mr. Newman, do you have any idea which direction the shots came from that hit the president or Conley? Did you say that one of the shots came from one direction and one from another, it seemed like?
No, sir. Actually, I feel that they both come from directly behind where we were standing.
Right behind you.
The president, it looked like he was looking in that direction. I don't know whether he was hit first. Apparently he wasn't. It looked like he jumped up in his seat, and when he jumped up, well, he was shot directly in the head. And I don't know what you call it, the mall behind us, but apparently that's
where he was. I know that a few minutes after that, when I came over there and asked you people if you'd be kind enough to come over and be on our station today, I know that the police were all taking off up the ramp and over.
Everybody was going in that direction.
Toward the railroad.
Yes, sir.
Cars back over in there.
I just hope the man that shot the president, I just hope they don't kill him. I hope he lives. I hope he just lives to regret what he did. And that's all the comment.
The presidential advisor.
Excuse me. Jerry Haynes, you know Jerry, our Mr. Peppermint. Jerry and I were within 100 yards of where the president was shot. And Jerry, you'll have to, there's another mic here somewhere. Can we excuse our impromptu, here we go. Can we turn this, is this one on now, Bobby?
On the Associated Press, someone had asked one of the presidential advisors or companions for any news, and he refused to comment. They asked if he had been wounded fatally. And this was about 5 minutes ago. That came over about the same time I brought that bulletin in.
Do we have a report yet from Parkland Hospital? Is there any word from there?
No, not yet.
Vicki, will you check in the newsroom and see if see if any of the newsmen are there. See if
Are we on tape or on there?
we're both. We're on the air now, and we are taping the program too. Your first appearance on television, I take it?
Yes, sir. It's my
And
first.
isn't it a shame that it's under the conditions that we're under now?
Yes, sir. It's a shame.
I would like to recap a little bit for those of you who might have turned in late. Jared, go ahead and just do as you have to do to see if we can get some further details in here. And also, you might check with Don Easterwood and see if there is some way we can get a telephone in here that we can take beep telephones. Will you, Jared? Or someone? Good. I'd like to recap for you the reason we are on the air. And it can best be said by these bulletins from the United Press, and then I will tell you what I know. The bulletin from the United Press. Thank you, Helen. President Kennedy and Governor Connally of Texas have been cut down by assassins' bullets in downtown Dallas. They were riding in an open automobile when the shots were fired. The president, his limp body cradled in the arms of his wife, Jacqueline, had been rushed to Parkland Hospital. A follow-up on that from the United Press. I read just a minute ago. And I can't, yes, here it is. I think I can best explain it to you in my own words. We were about 100 yards. If you're familiar with Dallas, Houston Street is on top of what we call the underpass, and the road curves down and underneath the viaduct. Jerry Haynes and I were standing there, and we heard one shot, and then immediately thereafter another shot, and then a third a little bit later, and I said to Jerry, my God, that those were gunshots, and we ran over, and unfortunately, I'm afraid they were.
It's nothing new, but just to...
Is it a recap?
Yes.
This we have said. Excuse me 1 minute and let me... Quote, Clint Hill, a Secret Service agent, this is from the United Press. Clint Hill, a Secret Service agent assigned to Mrs. Kennedy, said he's dead as the president was lifted from the rear of the White House touring car. Mr. Kennedy was rushed to an emergency room, and I believe it's Parkland Hospital. Is it, Jack? You have nothing? Okay, Jack Drabont, one of our producers, walked in. Other White House officials were in doubt as the corridors of the hospital erupted in pandemonium. We have told you where the incident occurred. What is the name of that street?
Where he was
shot.
Well, I suppose it's a continuation of Elm as it goes down.
It must be that goes into the underpass. He was slumped in the back seat of the car, face down. Connally lay on the floor of the rear seat. And also a few minutes ago, John, the newsman, I can't think of my name. No, John Allen, told me that he heard a report from one of the radios, and this is only a report, that there were 4 or 5 other people hit. I don't see how there could be, because I know there were only three.
3 shots.
There were only 3 shots. Jer, where's your mic? You got something to say, we might as well have you.
Well, I almost didn't go over with you, Jay. We were going out to lunch at
I know.
12, and you said...
I asked Vicki to go over, too, and you had some other work to do, and also Norvell Slater and some of the other people. The time is 1 o'clock. I would guess that this happened. I asked you what time it was at 12:30, so I would guess that this happened about 25 minutes until 1 o'clock.
You and I were chatting about 12:30. Some little boys were standing around, and I'd signed some autographs as Mr. Peppermint.
Right.
They asked where Jingles the Dragon was, and I said he was in school. And the mother said, well, this is where
A day in Dallas, Texas.
he came to see the president.
Thank you, Jack. If any of the newsboys come in, or if there are any beat phones come in that we can have transferred here, and you better get Don Easterwood, who is our audio supervisor, to see if we can take them here and put them directly on the air.
All right.
Put them directly on the air. Representative Albert Thomas of Texas says he has been informed that both President Kennedy and Governor John Connally of Texas are still alive. Let me repeat that. This is a bulletin. Representative Albert Thomas of Texas says he has been informed that both President Kennedy and Governor John Connally of Texas are still alive. Thomas made a statement outside the emergency room in which both Kennedy and Connally are under treatment. He said he had been told the president is still alive, but is in very critical condition. We will be on the air here. I know our boys are developing film now to see if we have any film coverage. We are regrouping in the newsroom, and Bob, I would suggest as soon as you can that either you break one of these cameras or one of the other cameras and put it in the newsroom and maybe a headlight on top of the camera, and let's move in the newsroom. Get an audio line set up there so that we can work directly out of there and find out exactly what's going on. We hope to God that this is true. I don't know when yes.
We have to get a tripod on one of the cameras. We can't get these in. So
I see. Okay, fine. Then we'll move in the newsroom. Representative Albert Thomas, and this I'll repeat again. Representative Albert Thomas of Texas says he has been informed that both President Kennedy and Governor John Connally of Texas are still alive. He made this statement outside the emergency room in which both Kennedy and Connally are under treatment. He said he had been told the president is still alive, but in very critical condition. North, what do you got?
From Congressman Jim Wright.
Same thing.
Well, let's read the whole thing here. Some of the Secret Service agents through the gunfire. That doesn't. Let's see. Some of the Secret Service agents thought the gunfire was from an automatic weapon fired to the right rear of the president's car, probably from a grassy knoll to which the police rushed. And that was confirmed a few minutes ago by Mr. and Mrs. Nunley, who were eyewitnesses to this event. And we will have them back a few minutes later in case some of you are late tuning in to our program. We would like for you to hear. Gee, I'm so.
That's right. In other words, they fired into the car and it came down.
And these people were in the line of fire.
As a call has been sent out.
Congressman Jim Wright of Fort Worth said both Kennedy and Connally were seriously wounded but still alive. A call has been sent out from some of the top surgical specialists in Dallas, and a call also went out for a priest.
It's unusual, the reaction you get when you see someone, well, of course, like the president, such a political figure. It's as almost, well, there they were in front of you and I, and it seems to me that the president looked directly, because we were applauding, yes, directly, I'd say at you probably, because a little taller than I am, and there he was, and he waved at you, and then they rounded the corner, and just a few seconds later, we heard the shots.
I would say a minute before.
And the lady had a camera, I remember, was taking personal films of it.
Yeah.
And she, I think, was an eyewitness, and she had come running over and crossed the street.
Screaming, yeah.
Yes.
Just a minute, yeah. Don.
The cruiser's on its way to Parkland.
The cruiser is on its...
It's at Parkland.
It is.
They'll be feeding in before long.
All right, stand by. We have our remote cruiser is on its way to Parkland Hospital, and we'll be feeding there as soon as possible. Bob Walker will be there. Will someone please see if they can get a hold of the cruiser and Bob and tell him that we will work audio cues on the air because the people understand the type of program. It's not a program, and they'll understand why if we say, the notice about the call going out for the priest. Well, I think this one sentence sums up the situation as of this moment. A call has been sent out for some of the top surgical specialists in Dallas, and at the same time, a call has gone out for a priest. It's 3 minutes after 1 o'clock. Jerry, somewhere around 12:35 this took place, so 30 minutes ago. Would you, while I get a breath and a drink of water here, recap the situation as to until now?
Right.
We'll be moving in our newsroom so that we can talk to the boys in the news department as they come in. Our cruiser is now on its way to Parkland Hospital. We will keep you up to date as soon as...
It's at Parkland Hospital.
It is at Parkland now.
They still have to hook up, though.
And they're trying to get it hooked up. Jerry, I'll be back in a couple of minutes.
All right. Well, as an announcer, it's my duty, ladies and gentlemen, to stand by in the announce booth here at WFAA TV. And we began our feed of the president's arrival this morning. It was at 9 o'clock. And he was speaking at Fort Worth, of course, as you saw on Channel 8 or any of the other television stations in this area. And he made a very fine speech lasting some 15 minutes in length. Then he went outside and was in the jet, took off, and arrived at Love Field. Bob Walker, our Channel 8 newsman, stood by as we, in turn, fed the other television stations on the president's arrival in Love Field, and he was met by Mayor and Mrs. Cabell, by Mr. Eric Johnson, and other of the dignitaries who were to share the speaker's table at Market Hall this afternoon as he was to give an address. And at the time, Bob Walker remarked after the president met the official welcoming group as he went out of his way to shake the hands of those who had lined the fences, having come out to Love Field this morning very early, and ignoring the possibility of rain. Of course, the sky is cleared and the clouds weren't to be seen, but the president shook all of the hands, and we saw the Secret Service men, and they followed him, and I wondered at the time just how effective. Of course, you have to be as effective as you can be, but there are human errors, and you can't cover all areas. And the Secret Service men, who must have the most difficult task in the world in guarding the president, were behind him at every angle as he shook the hands of everyone. I noticed a high school girl shook the president's hand, and then at about, I'd say 15 minutes until 12, the motorcade left Love Field, heading for its predetermined route down Lemon Avenue into the downtown area, and they were to come down Commerce and turn right on Houston, rather to come down Main and turn right on Houston over to Elm, turn left on Elm, and down under the now spot that will be remembered, I'm sure, as the years pass, as the place where an attempt, and we hope the attempt remains in the press releases, was made on the life of the President of the United States. Here is the, in case you have tuned in, you probably know, of course, as much as I do, but this is the bulletin that came over the United Press, so I'll be repeating. But this is what has happened so far. President Kennedy and Governor John Connally of Texas have been cut down by assassins' bullets. They were shot as they toured downtown Dallas in an open car. The president, his limp body in the arms of his wife, was rushed to Parkland Hospital. The governor also was taken to the same hospital. Clint Hill, a Secret Service agent assigned to Mrs. Kennedy, made a statement. No, he said he's dead, but he isn't. But this is what the gentleman said at the time. As the president was lifted from the rear of the White House touring car, Mr. Kennedy was rushed to an emergency room in the hospital. Other White House officials were in doubt as the corridors of the hospital erupted in pandemonium. The incident occurred just east of the triple underpass facing a park in downtown area. President Kennedy's mother and father have been advised that their son was shot in Dallas, and the Secret Service says the president remains in the emergency room at the hospital while Governor Connally was moved to the general operating room. One Secret Service man was overheard telling another that there was no need to move the president because emergency facilities were entirely adequate in the emergency room, and 2 Roman Catholic priests have been summoned to the emergency room where the president is. A White House spokesman said someone had asked for the priests.
We got audio. You fellas, don't be afraid. If you have something to do, go ahead and say it, because the people understand. I'd like to ask this of you. Please do not call the police department, do not call the radio stations, the television stations, do not call the hospital. Particularly, do not call Parkland Hospital. Those lines are needed. Every telephone in that building will have to be made available to the Secret Service and to the people who are working to save the life of the president. Please do not call the Parkland Hospital. Do not call the television station. Our switchboard has been tied up for the last 25 minutes now. Do not call. In fact, it might be a good idea with all the long-distance calls coming out here, unless a telephone call is absolutely necessary, not to make the call. Are we ready in the newsroom now? We are. Okay. Bobby, why don't you just take your shot over there and pan around, and we will walk over and pick up the audio. Let's turn the mic on. I can't hear you, Johnny. What do you want? You want me to move back a little bit? Is it all right now? Ladies and gentlemen, this is the newsroom of our radio and television station. As you can see, most of the boys are out. Bert? Let's see. Let's get reorganized here. Grab that cable over there. We're on the air, Bert, and let's talk to you just a minute here. Is this all right? Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce to you the chief cameraman and assistant news director of WFA Television. This is Bert Shipp. Bert, we have brought the people pretty much up to date. Would you tell them exactly what you know as of this point?
Well, Jay, I was standing at the trademark waiting his arrival there. All of a sudden, we saw them approaching. They didn't slow down. As a matter of fact, they were going 70 or 80 miles an hour past us. Everybody was unknowingly didn't know what happened there at the Trade Mart. And then I jumped in a police car and went to Parkland. When I got there, I found that nobody knew too much about where he was hit, but they knew that the president was shot in the head. This is what I've been told now, Jay. The president was shot in the head. Connally was shot in the chest. Both of them are still alive when I left the hospital.
Do you have some film?
And yeah, I have film
Will
at the
you get
hospital.
the film and see if you can get it developed real quick,
Yeah,
and
I
we'll
will.
put it on the air
And
and run through.
one quote we got out there was Yarborough said the scene was too gruesome to describe.
I know.
And I've spent most of my time, so I'm going to get the film ready now.
Good. Ladies and gentlemen, let me bring you up to date. Jerry Haynes and I were within about 100 yards of where the president was shot this afternoon on the grassy knoll there. And you will understand if we repeat ourselves, it's for the benefit of the people who have tuned in late. We are presently televising over WFAA television from our newsroom all that we know as of this moment. And as you can imagine, some of the stories that you will hear are not factual. The story that I told a few minutes ago about we heard that 6 or 8 people were wounded. This is not true because we only heard 3 shots and Jerry and I were witnesses. We will have film on the air. Our mobile cruiser is either at or rushing to Parkland Hospital. We will have word from there. There was a gentleman who was an eyewitness. Helen, is he here? Mr. Nunley, would you come in, please? When I first looked over the balcony to where the chaos was taking place, this gentleman and his wife and 2 children were on the grass. Now, once again, if you joined us originally when we cut into the program about 1:45 to 1 o'clock, you heard his statement. Mr. Nunley, would you tell us once again exactly what... Mr. Newman, I'm sorry. Look right there. Mr. Newman, will you tell us exactly what you know?
Well, my wife and my 2 sons were standing at the curb looking at the president approaching us, and we heard a blast, and the president looked like that he jumped up in his seat, and by that time he was directly in front of us, and then we seen him get shot in the side of the head, and he fell back in the seat, and Governor Connally was holding his stomach.
And the shots were almost simultaneously, weren't they?
Yes, sir, they were probably 10 seconds apart.
Do you know who fired the 3rd shot?
I didn't hear a third. I don't recall a 3rd shot. There may have been. My family hit the ground, and I don't recall a 3rd shot. I just couldn't. I'm not certain of that. I do know I heard 2 shots.
Yeah, I heard 3. I know there were 3.
Well,
yeah, I said to Jerry after the 2nd shot, I said, my God, those are gunshots. And sure enough, they were, unfortunately. Let me bring you up to date now. Yeah, I understand that we're having trouble in here with a pickup, so we'll move back to the studio. Is that correct? Just a minute. Ed, what is it you said? This is Ed Pfeiffer, our station manager. Excuse me just a minute. You want to go have a cup of coffee, and we'll be right back.
I think it might be better, Jay, if we move this back into the studio.
Okay.
In that it's very difficult to hear on the air.
The audio's bad? Okay, good. Okay, we'll move back in the studio. Jerry is standing by in there now. Let's see. Bert, as soon as the film is ready, you'll let us know so we can run it.
Jay, has ABC called from New York?
I have no idea. Okay, let's go back in the studio.
Feeding both networks.
Thank you very much.
Take one, Bob.
The time now, we're back at studio here where the news is given each day, and the weather and the sports, known as Studio B here at WFAA television. Time now is, in 15 seconds, will be 1:15, so it was approximately, yeah. Yes,
See, I'm trying to find out, uh-oh. Excuse me.
Two of the networks.
I beg your pardon?
I said being fed.
Go ahead, Ed, I can.
Fed live on the networks.
Good.
From here.
I understand that we are feeding 2 of the networks at this moment. Is that correct? Well, since this is the case, I think we should start from scratch again and explain to you what happened. Would you see that Mr. Nunley or Mrs. Nunley come back in so that we can talk to them? Jerry Haynes and I were about 100 yards. My name is Jay Watson. We're about 100 yards from where President Kennedy was shot this afternoon at approximately 12:35 Central Standard Time. The president, we know that he has been shot. We know that the top surgical people in Dallas have been called to Parkland Hospital, and two priests have been summoned. And I think that sums up the situation as of now.
It says here, Jay, that President Kennedy has been given blood transfusions in Parkland Hospital in Dallas in an effort to save the president's life after he and Texas Governor John Connally were shot as the president was traveling on the outskirts of Dallas in a motorcade.
Good. Jared, let me bring... Mrs. Newman, would you come in, please, and let me get your account of your eyewitness. You just sit right over here. And the little boy. Did you get some coffee finally?
I don't drink coffee.
Well, would you like to have something? I know that
No, my stomach's kind of churning. I'm afraid that I won't be able to drink it.
Mrs. Nunley.
No, Newman.
Newman, I've been calling you. I'm sorry. I don't even remember my own name, really.
It's terrible.
Tell me what happened.
We were standing next to the curb so the children could see the president, and the car was just up a piece from us, and this shot fired out, and I thought it was a firecracker. And the president kind of raised up in his seat, and I thought, you know, he was kind of going along with a gag or something. And then all of a sudden this next one popped, and Governor Connally grabbed his stomach and kind of laid over to the side. And then another one, it was just all so fast, and President Kennedy reached up and looked like he grabbed his ear, and blood just started gushing out. And my husband said, "Quick, get down." And I grabbed the baby, and we ran and laid down on the grass, and I got on top of him. It was just right by us when it all happened, just right in front of us.
Well, when I saw you looking over the balcony there, you and your husband and your two little children. Who's this one now?
This is James Clayton.
Hi, baby.
Can you say hi? He's got some candy.
What's he doing?
He didn't talk.
He's cute, isn't he? He didn't say anything?
Oh, he can talk.
Does he?
He can say thank you.
Have you seen President Kennedy before?
We were out at the airport, and we didn't get a very good view of him. And so we decided we'd try to get downtown to see him, because Billy, that's our youngest son, is getting old enough that he remembers things like that, and we wanted him to be able to say that he saw President Kennedy. And
now he will be able to say that he saw President Kennedy when he was shot.
Yes, he's already saying, "Mother, why would someone want to shoot President Kennedy?" Children, you don't realize how they catch on to things, but he's already talking about why would they want to kill him, and that's a question that everyone will be asking.
You didn't see anybody?
No, it happened so fast that you didn't have a chance to see anything. It just was too fast.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for coming down. I appreciate your time very much, and I know that you're upset, and I hope that we didn't embarrass you in any way.
No.
And good luck to you and your family and to your
Thank
two little
you.
boys, and tell your husband, too, that we appreciate his time and trouble very much. You people who are looking in will excuse us if we sort of get organized on the air here. Bobby, I understand that we have some film that is in the process, that is being... Bert Shipp has some, I think, one of our newsmen. It is being processed at the moment, so we will have that film. We are rushing our mobile cruiser. Beg pardon?
Physically, it might be a good idea for people who are watching who have never been to Dallas before to explain.
I'll tell you what let's do. Is Sam Smith around, our artist? Sam, if we can have a piece of cardboard and a piece of chalk, we'll try to explain to you exactly where the location is in Dallas, Texas. Will someone see if we can have something to do a little artwork? He's on his way. Good. Well, we'll have a little drawing for you of where it is this morning. I tell you, Bob, is Turner? Is he still directing?
Yes.
Okay, Bob, if you will get the film out, the videotape that we made this morning, and take about 4 or 5 minutes out of it, the part where we had President and Mrs. Kennedy shaking hands with the people up at the rail. Let's run that in just a few minutes, if you will. Vicki, would you get me some coffee, please, ma'am?
The motorcade, for all practical purposes, was finished. Of course, they were to go down the rest of and go under what we call in Dallas our triple underpass. Elm Street runs down a gently sloping incline as it goes west, and the president's official car had just turned off of another street, Main, which is 1 block south of Elm.
You threw all the crowd, because from there on out to what we call the Trade Mart is a 8-lane freeway.
And there's some industrial areas and a few of the people off from lunch, but the president had seen all of the crowd who had gathered. And so as he turned, the presidential motor car, going down at an incline of about 15 to 20 degrees, for all practical purposes, the parade in Dallas was over. And we had turned ourselves to go back to WFAA when those 3 shots rang out at the time, not sounding like shots, but you did remark.
Yeah, I said, my God, those are gunshots. And the people started screaming, and we ran over and looked over. Yeah, go ahead, set it up here.
The gunshots occurred about 12:35 this afternoon, and it is now 1:20 Central Time.
Okay, we need something to write with, and then we'll be in business to try to show you where this took place in the city of Dallas. And I'm not...
Tape's ready, Jay.
The tape is ready. Well, while we draw this out, this tape was made earlier this morning in a feed that WFAA picked up and originated for the stations in Dallas, WFAA, KRLD, KTVT, and WBAP. He arrived at about 11:35, almost to the hour from when he was shot at Love Field. Let's take about 4 or 5 minutes, and I'll tell you when, Bobby. Let's take the tape. Now, this is pre-taped. This is a tape that we made this morning. Let's look at that, shall we?
Running over to get behind other fences to catch a better glimpse of the caravan as it will leave here shortly and go to downtown Dallas. The president is up to the fence now, shaking hands with people. The president and his wife are right up on the fence. The press is standing up high, getting a lot of shots of this. He's done as he has done in several places. He's broken away from his plan and gone right up to the fence to shake hands with people. This is great for the people and makes the eggshells even thinner for the Secret Service, whose job it is to guard the man. But the audience loves this. Mrs. Kennedy's beautiful pillbox hat was the only thing that gave it away. I saw the hat, and I knew they were there. And, of course, the press going high and shooting right down below as the president and his wife kind of moving along the gate. People yelling at them, people running on the inside now trying to come down to this end of the gate, this end of the fenced-off area, hoping that the president and his wife will move along the fence. There you see the crowd just matted around. A lot of people out with cameras, just holding them up and snapping away and hoping to get a picture out of their very own camera of the president and his wife. President still walking along that inside fence, shaking hands, talking with people who have come out to greet him. They didn't expect this. Now, as he becomes more visible down to this end, the people cheer. And here they come, right down toward us. I can see Mrs. Kennedy. And they're going to come right on down and shake hands with everybody. Mrs. Kennedy gave a lovely smile and a wave at that time. Mrs. Kennedy right up. There's the president shaking hands with the people. He's waving at a lot of people, smiling, Secret Service men all around. Boy, this is something. They break right away and come right up to the fence, and the people who waited all morning in this fence are rewarded with a glimpse, and a lot of them with a close look and a handshake with the President of the United States and his wife. And he's coming right down toward us and toward our fine camera positions here. press is having a field day. Somebody perched up on somebody's shoulders. Secret Service right along with the president, of course. The president passes right in front of a Dallas police officer, right in front of our cameras now. Somebody patted his shoulder. Mrs. Kennedy coming along behind him, grinning all the while. The president saying, "Thank you very much. If I may be permitted to read a presidential lip movement."
Been the side of...
This is a bonus for the people who have waited out here. Now, Mrs. Kennedy, right along behind him. President still moving over towards some phone booths that were set up for the press. The people surging up toward that fence.
We interrupt this. Wait just a minute. I hear... Just a moment.
It's a trademark.
All right.
Secret Service man.
Let's go to the Secret Service. Let's go to the trademark, Bobby. Is that correct? All right, take it. Let's see what we have.
Final as of this morning. Rift has existed for a long time in the Democratic Party in Texas, and this rift, the Democrats will tell you, whether they be conservatives or loyalists or liberals or moderates or whatever faction of the Democratic Party they belong to in Texas, they all say that this is just an inter-party fight and we can all get together when the president comes to town. Well, finally they did get together. The big bone of contention had been whether or not Senator Ralph Yarborough, who is considered certainly in the liberal wing of the party, would be seated at the head table. He does not get along too well with Vice President Johnson or with Governor Connally. The word was that last night the senator refused to ride in the motorcade in the same car with Vice President Johnson.